Prices are down 22%. Is it time to panic? Stay tuned to find out on this week's episode of Prime Props TV. Promise you, it'll be worth it. Good day, Toronto. Welcome to another episode of Prime Properties TV. So glad you joined me here today. Today, we are going to go through the crazy thing that everyone's going to be talking about in the next probably week or two or so, where prices are down depending on where you measure it. And from the peak, prices down 22%. So the question now becomes, is it time to panic? So that's going to be topic number one. The topic number two we have over here is there is a recession coming. We're going to talk about that. Then we got how you can get mortgages using cryptocurrencies, a labor shortage, some more pre-construction condo cancellations, and the last one we got here is a weird editorial that I'm just going to comment on because it really outlines kind of the frustration of millennials buying their first home right now when they're expecting kids, which is a really large cohort of the population right now. So without further ado, let's go look at article number one. Home prices tumble across the GTA since February peak with suburban townhomes leading the pack. So I have this theory where I believe the semis and the towns in the suburban area are going to get hit the most. And I think it is coming true where anyone who has a home, they bought it, say, a few years ago for like sub $1 million. They thought they could sell it for 1.3. Then they're like, oh, you know what? Let's move up to that detached. They're moving into that detached. They bought it for 2 mil, right? So it made total sense at the time in January, February, because there was equity in the townhome and you moved to the freehold home, right? A freehold townhome, freehold detached home, right? But the problem is if they were appraising now, the detached is probably worth less than what they bought it for because it was the height of the frenzy. And now their town is selling for less. So those who need to sell their home to make sure they can be still close on the contract and not get sued are selling for much less than what they have. That's why I think the non-detached freehold homes in the suburbs are, taking a beating the most. But I looked, the detached areas are taking a little bit of a beating, but not as bad as some of the freeholds of semi and town. And you'll see that a little bit later. So this is actually a pretty big article. I think a lot of people have sent it to me. And they're saying that prices are down 22% from February 1st until April 19th. Now, it is true, obviously. I think the number's a little bit premature, I would say. We'll finally find out later this week when I do the market watch when the official numbers come out, but it's probably within close, give or take, right? Now, the interesting thing on this point is that they're selectively picking a certain date, obviously, but it's still a good indicator of how far from the top we have fallen, and 22% is correct. Actually, on the next one here, so this is kind of the numbers where it came from. You can see that the detached fell about 12%, the semis fell about 13.5%, and then the towns fell about 22.6%. That is outlined in red, just to let you know. But it is very true. And of course, you have to look at where the home is, right? Like I've been saying a lot. The detached numbers for the 4 and 6, I'm pretty sure actually went up just from what I can tell and looking at some of the data already. But everything else has kind of come down. And the condo took the least of the beating so far from those days, right? So this is still very hand select kind of stats, right? Because very rarely do you look at a 45-day rolling average, right? So it's true, but it kind of skews a little bit. It's kind of like if you ever watch sports and someone's like, hey, this is the guy who had 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 3.2 steals, and is the only person ever to do it. This is kind of like that, right? But there is some truth in what that is, right? So going back kind of to the article, there's a couple of people who kind of commented on it, and I think I agree with them. I'm going to point that out. But if anyone's interested in kind of looking at the heat map of somewhere this go, the link is in this description below to show you kind of like what the year over change is. It's actually really well done. Really well done. Bravo, Toronto stock. Bravo. So the first one I highlighted here says that if you're a home buyer and you're looking in the central Toronto area, it's busy. There are bidding wars and condos are still relatively decent. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see that play out in these numbers. We're seeing still plenty of offers on the really nice homes. So like the picturesque, perfect homes that everyone's kind of looking for. And I'm going to tell a lot of my clients, if you're trying to hit what I call the holy trinity of schools, being a good public school, middle school, and a high school, there's only so many pockets that actually hit all three, right? And those areas are still very hot right now because, like I was saying before, people who are buying in these like $2-3 million price range aren't too concerned about the interest rate. They have the ability to pay for it and they're not taking that big of a mortgage. And what's more important to them is their kids going to the school, right? Not so much the fluctuation in the price because it's a 10-year horizon. The next thing here is saying, I think John Pascal from Philosophy is saying that he thinks it's temporary, but don't know how long temporary is. And I tend to agree with him on this. I don't know how long this is going to last and whether this is an opportunity for a buying, right? And that's why it says you have to look at which market you're looking at. Like if you're looking at the 4 and 6 like homes near the good schools, I'd say it's probably a good opportunity now. It's a little bit slower, but still competitive. But if you're kind of looking in the burbs in the 905, depending on where you're looking at, may not be a good idea, maybe a good idea. Again, depends on the location you're at, right? So we don't know how long this is gonna last. You obviously have people on the far, left side calling for a crash, 20, 30%. I don't think that's happening. Maybe there will be kind of like some kind of correction, like 20%, right? Like kind of like what we saw in the towns. Maybe it's a good opportunity. Again, talk to the person that you trust or you want to work with us. I'll put my link here right here. You really got to figure out kind of what's happening in your specific area you're trying to look for, right? Or you want to be opportunistic if you can find something for a deal and catch a motivated seller. Yeah, that could also work too, right? Now, the interesting thing is the person who also published the House Sigma data, right? They're saying that the strong fundamentals in Toronto are going to, over long term, be good for the market, but in the short term, it's not going to be great. That's my perspective, right? And I have a video coming out on this, kind of how predicting the future. So make sure you subscribe to the Profile channel and click the little bell so you know when it's coming out, right? Now, the key thing I'm going to point out here on this kind of highlight over here I got here is if you're not an investor or flipper and you bought your house to live in for a period of 5 to 10 years, right? So the cooling won't mean much because people only look at real estate prices when they're moving or if they're in the real estate industry, right? And everyone in Toronto seems to have an opinion on real estate right now. But if you're not moving, right, you're not following the news, right? Like I have clients who bought a house 5 years ago. They're not like, Zhen, what's my house worth right now? Granted, there are some of you right now, but most of them are like, I'm living in my home. I don't really care. So to kind of take a subset of the demographic and apply it to everything, not necessarily correct, but those who are caught in the middle, especially if you bought something and you have to sell something right now for less, yeah, it's going to be a lot of trouble. And similar to what happened in 2017, I would smell some litigation coming here or there, right? The second article I kind of already briefly showed you, which is kind of the GTA home pricing. Thing I want to kind of show you here, I'm going to blow it up, is that they break it down by areas, and you can see that the really, really far ones in up north in York region tend to get hit the most. Then you go down, you got the extended areas, then you got the kind of suburban areas, and you go all the way down here. Burlington actually went up, right? So I was saying this, like, I would say most of the homes I've seen in Oakville and Burlington on the west side have done pretty well, and central Toronto as well, right? All right, so we got the next one. The recession. Everyone's going to freak out about this. I think this is the next topic that everyone's going to freak out about. Now, keep this in mind, right? Like we as a country, Canada is just a little piece of the pie. We are like USA's hat. We are the 52nd state. California's GDP is better than all of Canada's. So take what I'm about to tell you with a grain of salt because everything I'm telling you right now applies to the US, not the Bank of Canada. But like I've always said before, Canada takes after the instructions of the US for interest rate hikes. We've always followed along. So if you just plot some graph of US interest rate hikes against Canada interest rate hikes, generally about the same. We deviate like once or twice, but more or less the same. So they're saying here right now that, again, media likes to deflect things like, right? But I would say that this is a pretty good deflection. They're saying that the decline in economic growth is due to the pandemic and the new variant that came in. Remember, these are a few months late, so we're dealing with this in January. And you can see here that they originally actually predicted a 1.4% increase in terms of GDP from last quarter, but now we saw a 1.1 decrease. So that's a pretty big swing, right? Like it seems like a small amount, but it's pretty big because it's you go from positive to negative. Now, what you have to understand is that we haven't even felt the effects, like globally, of the Shanghai port shutting down because China wants to be COVID zero, right? I think Beijing is also shutting down. We also have the war that's happening right now. So we haven't really felt those before, and interest rates can't change that. So I would not be surprised if we're going to see another quarter of kind of decrease in GDP growth. And what that means is when you get 2 quarters of GDP decline, you're going to get a recession. That's the technical term. So at the end of June, when they report this, we're probably like closer to July, right? You're going to see that we're either in a recession or not in a recession. And then the Fed, which is the Bank of Canada equivalent, has to do some policy changes to affect this, right? So what this means is that we are potentially, as Canada for real estate related, following the US Feds hiking into a recession. That's really unheard of. And I've said this before, at some point, something's going to break, right? Here is already signs of a crack. Keep in mind, Canada did a 50 basis point hike. US has only done a quarter point. They're planning to do the 50 basis point probably sometime this month, right? Because their date hasn't been announced yet. I think it's like May 3rd or something. So this means that we have a recession, we've seen cracks, and US has only had 1 rate hike, we have 2. Are they going to increase another 50? Probably, because policymakers are behind on the 8 ball, as normal. But how long are they going to be able to increase interest rates? That's always a question I've always been kind of posing. I think we're still in for another 50 in June in Canada specifically, but it's going to take some time for them to realize that they're in recession. And I think they're going to have to increase the interest rate so they can drop it back down for the recession, right? And I kind of talk a lot more about that with the guys at the Canadian Real Estate Show, TK and Daryl. So you can check out the long form interview up here. Check that out. It's a pretty good conversation. But the whole point of this whole recession thing is not to scare you or tell you that the interest rates are going in one direction. It's just, look, we're already seeing cracks. And this is to show you that we have so much debt that these interest rates and all these kind of external forces, geopolitical stuff is ultimately going to affect us. Can we continue hiking rates into this kind of economic environment? I don't think so, but it's still going to take some time before the rates come back down. So I don't know, I wouldn't even expect anything to come back down until 2023, right? We're still probably going to see rate hikes until the end of the year. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on it. Now, the one thing that they highlight really, really importantly here, like I was saying earlier, is that the Federal Reserve has not seen a recession type of event or like a decline in GDP since the pandemic because they kept throwing money out there. Obviously, everyone's trying to stop kind of printing out the money, but now we're kind of running into the slowing of money printing with these Ukraine things and also the lingering effects of the pandemic restrictions in different parts. So we are in for a really weird time. And anyone who tells you it's like the 90s, it's like the 40s, I don't think we've seen something like this before. Like keep in mind, I think the last pandemic was the Spanish flu, right? So things for you to consider when looking at this. I'm not saying this is going to be coming down the pipeline and affecting us really quickly, but it's something that's kind of like brewing in the background. All right, so we got the next one here. So this is a courtesy of my client / neighbor. And it's very interesting because I talked about this before where the trades, and right here the headline is carpenter strike, vote looms, bricklayers reach tentative deal. And what this basically means is anyone who's building a home, building a condo for you, this type of blue collar worker is in very short supply. Their wages have been really high. I know a lot of plumbers and HVAC people who come out of apprenticeship and they make over 100 grand. So they make way more than white collar workers because they're in more demand. It's already been that way since before the pandemic, but the pandemic has made it worse because everyone wanted to renovate their home and everyone's trying to build some stuff because the housing market went on an absolute tear. So when you have the demographics that's mainly doing this, they're coming to retirement. So there's a lot of these skilled laborers that don't want to do this anymore. Canada only wants to, bring over white collar workers. So nobody that like is my age grows up and is like, I can't wait to be a bricklayer, right? They're really, really difficult to come by, right? So like masonry is really tough to do. So with there being such a short amount of people ready and them kind of coming with a strike or potentially increasing the wages, that's going to have a really slow effect on how our supply is going to be affected in the future. Right? That means that if the wages do go up, that means the cost gets pushed on to us as the buyers or anyone who's doing renovations or buying a home, right? Or if there's any stoppage of work, it just means that we're going to have the halting of the supply being created. So these are all long-term effects, again, that are also kind of, brewing in the background. So this is the type of content you enjoy. Make sure you help us spread the knowledge out there by smashing the like button and subscribing to the Prime Props channel because every week we put up awesome content and review of articles like this to tell you an idea of what the hell is happening in the real estate market because it's going to be like this probably for the next 2 months, right? So if you want to work with our team because we're honest and transparent, you can book calls with me using the link right here. It's www.chatwithzen.com. Now back to the article here. So the next one we got here is crypto mortgages let homeowners keep Bitcoin, put nothing down. This one. Yep. I knew this was going to be coming at some point, right? So what's basically happening is anyone who's owned cryptocurrencies, specifically Bitcoin or Ethereum in this one, is saying that they can now use this as collateral to get a mortgage. So there's banks, it's not in Canada yet, but it's in the US. They're able to get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage right here secured against their property in terms of holding their Bitcoin or Ethereum as collateral. So as this type of asset becomes more and more popular, I think this type of mortgage is gonna be more and more popular. So my generation, right, the millennials and even probably like the Gen Z or Zoomers, right, I think the adoption of cryptocurrencies are gonna be a lot more popular, right? So the bigger ones like Bitcoin are gonna be able to kind of be staked and people can lend against them. Obviously, you have to do your own due diligence. There's more volatility to it, but if there's one way of kind of getting ahead and using down payment, obviously cryptocurrency with the volatility, if done correctly, you can use that to have a large down. And also just like when the money transfers from the boomers to their kids, the millennials, right? I think a lot of these asset allocations are going to go into the crypto space and the real estate asset space. I just don't think bonds are that great anymore. And while there are some equities, I think real estate's more popular just in the zeitgeist of the Canadian real estate, in the Canadian population right now. So the next one we got here, these are going to get a little bit sad. So you got some more condo cancellations. Again, the prediction said this would happen because of inflation cost and labor and all the financial stuff, right? But all of these pieces are always written as kind of like a story or narrative from someone's perspective. And they're always really sad to read, right? And this photo is really sad looking. This guy just looks really sad. So what's happening is Ideal Development, they're like a decent sized builder. They've had some previous projects. They're basically canceling their project. But the thing that's really messed up here is that Terrion secures about $150,000 of your deposit. And this project is going bankrupt, going belly under, and basically saying that, hey, look, we have to pay these guys first because you as the buyer are the kind of second or third tier people we have to pay back. So the messed up thing here is that the builder has asked the buyers to increase the deposit to $250,000 so that they can ultimately, at the end of the day, give them a $200,000 discount on closing. So you're basically, as a builder, asking the buyers to give you more money so they could spend that money to continue building the project, right? And in this article, if you read through it, it talks about how they're using it for marketing and building and consult fees. But what happens is if the project goes under because of inflation, labor, and material costs, then boom, the insurance only covers 150 or 100,000, I think, of their deposit, and then they're out of pocket for the rest of them. And this is really, really sad because people are not going to get this money back, right? Because at the very least, if you do like a condo, like some of the stuff that happened in Vaughan a few years ago, you're getting your deposit back, you lose your opportunity cost. Fine, that one stings a little bit. But for you to lose a part of your deposit and you don't get back, you lose the opportunity cost, plus you lose some money. Oh, this is rough, right? So apparently these guys were building without a permit, and the whole thing came crawling under. I'll put a link in the description and read it. It's just a really sad story. And this is why I'm saying, like, you really got to watch out for what you're buying if you're in the pre-construction phase, because if they're not a big builder, sometimes they will go under. And it sounds like these even medium-sized builders are going under as well, right? So be careful. And if they ask you for more deposit, definitely have a lawyer review it, because in a market where everything's going up, everything's making money, the builders are making money, you're making money by buying the contract and potentially selling it right on assignment. Everyone's happy. But when the market turns, everything, you're going to feel ripple effects throughout. And this is one of the ripple effects that we're feeling right now when the market is slowing down. So for anyone who's kind of bought a pre-con, especially like freehold, you got to watch out. You may come under appraisal and you're going to see if they're going to be able to build. And to add more fuel to the fire, we got another cancellation in Mississauga, Hazelton Development. Really small time builder. I think they have 1 or 2 projects, right? So highlights of Mississauga is basically getting canceled. The weird thing that I don't know what's happening is these guys are basically almost already built and then it kind of got pooched, right? So it's not even saying that like maybe they got dinged by the laborers or shortage of supplies or stuff like that, right? But it sounds like they basically got almost there, but they just couldn't meet the finish line. And this is how much stress you're seeing from the cost push inflation that's being pushed down to kind of builders, right? So if they're not able to complete the project, they can't get any more financing from the banks or stuff like that, then that means they can't complete the project and they have to sell it. And hopefully this doesn't end as poorly as Ideal Developments, but these are just a lot more that we see. And by my count, I think we're at like 4 already this year. So it's like 1 a month almost, right? Actually, I think 5. Yeah, so it's just wild. It's just wild. Then we got the last article here, which is the editorial piece that I found kind of ironically funny, but also not funny because it's someone's pain, right? But it's just ironic. So the head editor of the Toronto Star tried to buy a home, and now they're running through the emotions of what, and you would imagine someone who's the housing editorial would actually understand some of it. But I'm going to take you through some of the emotions, and this is kind of what I think a lot of the millennials who are trying to buy a home are experiencing right now. But I will say, I'm not kind of like pointing anything out about this person. It's actually very brave of them to share the story, but I'm going to share with you some of the things that they're going through, and to them, they're still feeling that they are lucky because they can look because they have help, whereas most people don't, right? So they started looking last year with a pre-approval, and they just really couldn't find anything, and everything was selling over the budget. Sounds familiar, right? Prices went up like 30-40% in the last bit. Again, not normal, but that's kind of what people are running into. And then at some point, they got excited, they found something, and then it got sold in bully offer. And that happens all the time, right? And when you have a really hot market, even if you have to do renovations, stuff gets picked up. And that's kind of what they experienced over here. And they are slowly inching up their budget. They went from what they said to buy something you need $180,000 income, then went to 200 because the market is going faster than what they could save or what their incomes are increasing by, right? So this is a very common thing unless you have like a big bank of mommy and daddy to help you with the bridging the difference, right? Then they continue searching and people are saying they're picky. But the problem is you could be picky, but if you're trying to buy a freehold home in Toronto for less than $1 million, it's not even about being picky. It's just there are really no options out there. There's like 10 or 12 homes last year that sold for less than $1 million in the 416 area. So I wouldn't say it's picky, but what I would kind of point this narrative to is that if you're being picky, it's about you being very adamant about wanting a freehold home because you want to raise a family there, which I completely understand, right? Because I would too, right? Hence, that's why we bought our house. But at the same time, I think the dream of ownership of a freehold home in Toronto or even the suburbs is going to come to kind of a halt at some point. And we're going to be more like the Eastern countries where raising a family in an apartment is very normal. It's just the zeitgeist of the demographics, like the mindset of the millennials haven't gotten there yet. But when push comes to shove and you want to live in the city and you want to own something instead of rent, you may have to look at those directions of larger condos, right? So that's why I've always pointed my clients like years ago to buy 2-bedroom condos because that's where I think the demographic is heading. Then they kind of went into like, oh, should we just kind of rent something bigger and move on with our lives? And again, people want to own their home because 65% of Canadians own their home, and it's kind of just been passed on, right? So if you're a parent to own a home, you want your kids to own a home, but it's just some of them don't understand this, right? And the funny thing, like in this article, is they kind of make fun of the joke about millennials and avocado toast. Like it's funny, right? Because millennials spend money on avocado toast, but I don't think not eating avocado toast is going to make a difference on $1 million property. It's just, unless you're eating it like every day and you're paying $25, right? But I don't think so. And then again, so they were saying that they're being stubborn, but they feel like they're lucky because despite prices are going up, interest rates are going up, they're still able to look because they still have the capability, right? So these are people who are optimistic, but also kind of being realist about what the market is looking like right now. Whereas there's some people who are just unrealistic, saying the market's going to crash. When a crash happens, 50 prices, I'll buy. Generally, those people are full of shenanigans and poo-poo because if it crashes 50%, trust me, the world's in a way worse situation for it to get down there. And then kind of like what their very, very key point I'm trying to point out here is the inability to find a home backs up the train for anyone who wants to move into their kind of larger apartment rental can't get there. So when everything freezes and no one can move up, the boomers aren't selling, it kind of messes up the turnover of the properties, and we are going to slowly see that. That's why we need these missing middle homes like garden suites and like legal apartments and intensification of these density areas. But city slow, right? So it's just very unfortunate because when you kind of go through this entire process, I've been through this kind of emotional roller coaster with some clients. Some have succeeded in getting something, some don't. And it's just unfortunate things. Sometimes it's within their control, sometimes it's not, right? So, I appreciate that she says that they still think they're lucky because they could look, but this is kind of insight into someone trying to buy a home. Because like I said last week, right? Going from 0 properties to 1 properties is so difficult. Going from 1 property to 2 is so easy. So that's why I was saying just get in the market if you can as a first-time home buyer. And hopefully this kind of gives you an idea of what to expect if you're trying to buy your first home, or if you want some help to guide you through this, we can definitely do that. We do work with a lot of first-time home buyers on our team. So if you want to do that, you can book a call with me using the link right here. It's www.chatzhen.com. And hopefully this kind of gives you an idea of, again, what's happening in this week of what's happening in the real estate market. I suspect the next one is going to be crazy because the official TREV numbers will be out and it's going to be all hell breaks loose. Pandemonium is about to happen, right? So you're going to enjoy those next ones. Anyways, hopefully you found this helpful. Until next time, your move, your future. See ya. Bye. Now that you're done watching this one, how about this one? Oh, you know what? This one's good too. Ooh, this one's really good. You know what? Just watch them both.